The major reason why we have low revenue base is because of widespread evasion, aggressive tax avoidance, and illicit financial flows by individuals, by companies, and also government-owned entities. To address this national problem, the government needs to use technology and tax intelligence to counter evasion and reverse the alarming trend.
Hello and welcome to Tax Matters. The Federal Inland Revenue Service, as indeed all revenue collecting agencies all over the world, has its job cut out for it. Assessing, collecting and accounting for taxes. Simple and straightforward, you may say. Yes, so there are tax offices all over the place, and thanks to technology, you can do everything and anything online now. But there are some sections and departments of the average tax collecting agency that work behind and in front of the scene to make things happen. Talk about compliance enhancement, enforcement activities, etc., etc. This is why we began our ongoing series in which we are unveiling the inner workings of the FIRS with interviews conducted with the top echelon of the FIRS in the person of coordinating directors. The different groups have also been holding retreats, strategy sessions to plan ahead for year 2021 and beyond. We have told you the story of some of those retreats. We'll be telling you the story of another one today, that of the Enforcement Support Group. We begin with the presentation of a paper on the review of 2020 group performance of the Tax Investigation Department by Alhaja Fauzat Oguni, Director, Tax Investigation Department at the FIRS. From the Director's presentation, one can easily deduce that the FIRS is not just sitting idly watching tax avoiders and evaders having a field day.
Out of the 70 million individuals and corporates that are involved in active business, we only have just 18 million in the taxpayers' net. And so as an enforcement group, I believe we have all the powers of the law that can give us more than the 26% that we have in the tax net. We're all familiar with 2020, a very, very famous year, fraught with a lot of challenges. But in spite of that, we were able to get approval for 752 cases based on trigger. So we were able to conclude 138 cases, and ongoing as at December was 251. Those that we tag as others are cases that we had to step down for one reason or the other, and then we were yet to agree dates on 199 and yet to commence 158. The next slide is speaking to the assessment that we raised, which was 43.95 billion in naira and 20 million in dollars. Amazingly, we had a collection of 52.65 billion. I'm sure somebody might be probing in his mind that how come you were able to collect more than you assessed. In one case, before the closure of the case, the company quickly went to pay 15 billion. And that was why you see the difference between the collection and the assessment in the first slide.
For year 2021,
we've been allocated a target of 148 cut across different tax operations, except for oil and gas, because oil and gas has a separate compliance team. If you have any case that borders on crime, we're also supposed to forward them to the Special Crime Division. We're also supposed to conclude 80% of all notified cases within the approved investigation life cycle of 90 days and 180 days. The last KPI is that we should refer at least 2 cases per quarter to management for enforcement action. We are lucky enough to have the legal and the debt enforcement in the same group, and I'm sure this will make things seamless for us. And like I mentioned earlier, the practice direction and the revenue code that is underway is all about to enhance our work and to make enforcement an easy thing for us.
Tax dodgers, beware. The FIRS dog can bark and bite. Mr. Matthew Bojubola, Director Tax Policy and Advisory Services, presented a paper on the Finance Act 2020.
In coming up with the amendments to the 10 laws that affected taxation, there were 5 guiding principles that were reflected in all the provisions that were either inserted or amended. The first one is the ability of FIRS to deploy automated tax administration system for the purposes of administering the various taxes. The second guiding principle was access to tax information, and I'm sure that is very key to this group. The third guiding principle was to block tax loopholes that we have in the law due to a number of lacunas that exist in current legislation. The fourth guiding principle was ease of compliance. That is, how do we make it easy for our taxpayers to comply with the law voluntarily? The last principle, which is ease of administration, and that is to make the job easy for you and I.
In keeping with the current push for technology to drive tax administration,
Section 68 and 69 makes it possible for us as FIRS to send notice of assessment by electronic means, so you can use emails and it will be valid as delivered. On the other hand, also, it also means that taxpayers can also send you correspondences, including notice of objection by mail.
to protect taxpayers.
Now, there had been an amendment to the secrecy provision in FIRS Act. Now, all taxpayer information are classified secret and confidential. Now, in order for us to get the many powers that we got regarding use of technology, we had to make a bargain with the legislators. And the bargain we made with them was that we are going to treat taxpayer information as confidential. And for them to accept that, they had to change Section 39(1). And please, I want you to pay serious attention to Section 31. And I will read it. Say that without prejudice to the provisions of any other acts concerning data privacy, data protection, and unlawful disclosure of taxpayer information shall be confidential. Now let's go to Section 50. I want to tie the two together. In Section 50, now, there had been an amendment there to say that what is taxpayer information? Any information received or generated by the service pursuant to its power under this act or an extant legislation is taxpayer information. If you disclose that information to unauthorized person, you risk going to jail for 3 years or paying a fine of 1 million or both.
Mr. Najim Ajila, Director Debt Management and Enforcement Department, also presented a paper detailing the performance of his department in year 2020. At the formal opening ceremony, the Coordinating Director, Enforcement Support Group, Mr. Ezra Zubeiru, spoke about efforts being made to reposition the group.
The group is, as we're all aware, is the enforcement arm of the service, comprising the tax investigation, debt management and enforcement, legal and prosecution, compliance research and risk management departments. The theme for this year's retreat is improving revenue generation through the effective implementation of the FIRS enforcement powers. The choice of this theme is informed by our efforts at currently repositioning the group to effectively carry out its mandate. The group is working with the judiciary to develop a practice direction, and this practice direction is a supplemental protocol for the service to enable it to get a quick dispensation of tax cases and to obtain enforcement orders without going through the regular court. So far, we have just about 4 agencies in the country that have this practice direction, which includes AMCON, DSS, and the EFCC. And this has greatly aided their speedy trials of cases.
The executive chairman, FIRS, was in attendance to formally declare the retreat open.
This retreat is coming at a time of unprecedented financial uncertainties, emerging fintechs, global pandemic, climate change, and technological disruption. These present realities have made most businesses to seek out loopholes and avenues to avoid paying their taxes. This has made it increasingly important for us as taxmen to reflect on the existing strategies and plan ahead for optimal utilization of all components of the enforcement powers of the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
To emphasize the importance of enforcement effort and the work that the group is doing in that regard, the chairman had this to say.
2020 is gone. Let us not be carried away with the successes and challenges associated with it. 2021 has a potential for us to be able to do more. We have to work hard to generate more, to be able to support government to fund these critical challenges confronting all of us. Your group is the last hope of the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
The job of the FIRS, as indeed that of any revenue-generating agency, is to assess, collect, and account for taxes. As you can see, that job or those activities can only be carried out when enforcement activities take place. In furtherance of this, the FIRS has issued a public notice. Pursuant to Section 26 of the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act 2007, as amended by the Finance Act 2020, the Federal Inland Revenue Service has issued a public notice requesting for further information from some companies. According to the notice, the request is consequent upon a review of records and business activities of companies by the FIRS. The 5 companies on the list, through their accredited representatives or directors, are being requested to immediately contact the service within 30 days of this notice, dated 19th April 2021, to provide required information. The notice ends by reminding all business entities to voluntarily register and file their tax returns at the nearest FIRS office as the service will soon commence the publication of the names of non-compliance companies for enforcement and criminal prosecution in line with the provisions of the relevant tax laws. The notice is under the hand of Muhammad Nami, Executive Chairman, FIRS. We sat down with Mr. Ezra Zubeiru, Coordinating Director of the Enforcement Support Group, for further elucidation on the work of his group. Mr. Zubeiru, thank you for joining us on Tax Matters.
Thank you, and welcome, viewers.
Sir, your group, the Enforcement Support Group, comprises, among other departments, the Tax Investigation Department and Enforcement Department. And in time past, enforcement involved armed policemen accompanying tax officials to seal off the premises of defaulting companies. Is that what enforcement entails or involves today?
You see, let me just say this. The concept of enforcement connotes the fact that there is non-compliance substantially to the provisions of the tax law in respect of filing, in respect of registration, in respect of payment, in respect of accurate reporting. Now, so most often tax authorities come up with strategies to ensure that this aspect, that's taxpayers, comply with the provisions of the tax law. Now, where it fails, you will see tax authorities coming up with measures to ensure that taxpayers duly comply with their filing obligations, payment obligations, and accurate reporting. Now, there has been enforcement previously, which entails use of armed policemen. To be sincere, it is still provided for in the law. It is only the fact that for now, we are not using that as an immediate measure. We use that as a last resort. Now, right now, there are so many measures we have taken, the Federal Inland Revenue Service has taken. For instance, the aspect of this registration, we try to encourage taxpayers to register. We collaborate with other agencies like the Corporate Affairs Commission. Right now, as you incorporate your company or incorporate your business, you're automatically given a tax identification number. So that aspect is reduced to a very great extent, except for older businesses that have been incorporated much earlier than now. And we try to use more of a kind of a moral suasion, taxpayer education, taxpayer enlightenment programs to see that we get them to register. And when it comes to issues relating to filing of their tax returns, we have the various tax offices, categorized into large sector taxpayers, medium taxpayers, micro and small taxpayers, and we also have a segment for government business operations. That is for MDAs at the federal, state, and local levels. And we make sure that they register for their, and they file their returns as they fall due. Now, that is one aspect. And where we have issues of non-filing, the normal thing is to raise penalties, impose penalties and interest. And if we have sufficient information in respect of the taxpayer, we send a notice of assessment based on the information we have to the extent of his transaction. Now, where that fails, there are some other compliance measures that are taken. The tax audit, for instance, is invited to get to the taxpayer. But if we notice that it is extreme, we use what we call the investigation mechanism. We have the tax investigation department that goes into the premises of those very taxpayers and ensure that all those obligations are complied with, and they obtain their records, both to ensure that they have filed or they filed adequately, and they pay their taxes, and we get them to fully comply. Now, there could still be some other instances where enforcement is required. There are different types of enforcement. Now, we can, if there's already an assessment or there's already a liability which the taxpayer ought to pay, to the extent of that very assessment or that very liability that the taxpayer owes, we can place a lien on the account of the taxpayer to that very amount until he complies. Then the lien is lifted. So those are basically the enforcement tools we're using now. Like I said, the aspect of sealing up of the premises is the last resort available to us, but it is provided for in the tax laws.
Time or time. This interview with Mr. Ezra Zubairu continues next episode as we have another set of guests in the house. We have in the studio a gentleman and a lady from the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, CITN. By my far right is Dr. Titi Fowoko. She is the chairman of the 23rd Annual Tax Conference Planning Committee, and Mr. Simon Kato is the conference director. Gentlemen and lady, you're welcome to Tax Matters.
Thank you, Amaka. Good morning.
Thank you so much.
Now, to what do we owe this visit?
We are here because of the 23rd Annual Tax Conference of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, 18th to 21st of May. So we are here just to talk about the conference and to let our people know that that conference is going to be live and direct this year.
Where is this taking place, Mr. Kato?
The conference will be taking place at the Center of Learning, as they call it, Kaduna State. The venue of the conference is the Umar Musa Yar'Adua Center, popularly known as the Murtala Square in the city center of Kaduna. And Kaduna State appears to be ready because we had a privilege of inspecting the facilities recently. A lot is going on, and I can assure us that it's going to be a wonderful outing.
It is customary to have a theme for the annual tax conference yearly. So what is the theme for this 23rd annual tax conference?
The theme this time around is taxation for economic recovery, a necessity for social engagement and economic sustainability.
Who are we to expect?
This year we are trying to really speak to the team. When we're talking about economic recovery, talking about social engagement, talking about economic sustainability. So you're having the Executive Secretary of Africa Tax Administrators Forum, Mr. Logan Watt, as one of our speakers. We are having Mrs. Adenike Adeyemi, Executive Director for Faith Foundation, because we're also talking about social engagement. And we are having Mr. Ari Eisen, the IMF representing Nigeria, because we're talking about recovery, economic recovery and the likes. And we also have from the Global Tax Administrators Platform, GTAP, we are having Professor Valentia, who will be connecting virtually to also share the global outlook on the topic we're going to be discussing. We also have people from our own institute from the Kaduna State, the Kaduna State Internal Revenue Chairman will be there. Lagos State Internal Revenue Chairman will be there. We have Professor Mainoma, one of our major council members.
Now, is this conference open to everybody?
Yes, it is. It's for members and non-members. As many as are ready to learn, the gate is wide open.
Now, Mr. Kato, COVID-19 has not quite gone away. So if I cannot attend this conference physically, are there provisions for virtual participation?
Oh, certainly. The conference has a full provision for participation virtually, and people will register. You'll be given an option to choose whether you want to be there physically. And of course, if you'll be there physically, the hall is big enough to ensure that the COVID-19 protocols are well observed and people are well seated, hotel accommodations and everything. If you not be there, certainly you can participate in all sessions.
Now, for me to attend physically and virtually, what is expected of me?
We have a platform that people can register, www.citnevents.org. So once you go in there, all the information that is required, the details will be put there. You can also link out to the payment platform from that site. You make your payment. Conference fee is 100,000. We've not increased it. We've left it the same way as it is, just to encourage participation. For those who are students, we give them discount, 50% discount. They can get that discount. Our aged members are also having discounts that they can benefit from.
There you are. The 23rd Annual Tax Conference holds in Kaduna from the 18th to the 21st of May 2021. It's going to be turbocharged. We will be there. We want you to be there. Thank you for watching. See you next week.